But yeah, so let's, I guess, get started on like, what is the application process like? And then, I don't know, maybe move into like, what's it like there? Really, whatever you want to talk about.
Absolutely. So I think it starts around your freshman, sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
There's no way, like, I mean, in your case, I think you're a special case because you knew since a young age, since you had, your grandfather so close to you and, helping you try to get to West Point, right? But you don't need to be 100% committed to West Point your freshman or sophomore year, right? It's just impossible to know. But I think it's a good idea to look at the profile that we're talking about, so that way you know what you need to start setting yourself up to achieve. And I think that not only doing this for West Point, it will help you for your other schools, right? Cole did all this, and he got into some good schools, UC Berkeley. I got into UC San Diego. So just knowing what to do to get me into West Point really helped me get into other schools as well. So,
and I would have not gotten into Berkeley had I not followed kind of this formula to get into West Point. I think my West Point application helped me across the board.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like
every school I applied to.
It's a very holistic overall personality kind of thing, right? They're not just solely focusing on academics. Are you a nerd or are you a stud on the football field, right? They want someone who's average in everything.
But
right?
I think what's cool is there's kind of a formula to it.
Yeah, I mean, there might be, maybe not. I don't know, but it's looking at that profile would definitely help. So freshman year, I think the key freshman year of high school is just focusing on your academics, right?
Yeah.
Focus on your academics. Try to get those A's and B's. Join some clubs at your school. Maybe join a sports team. You need to do some sort of sport, whatever it is, golf, soccer, volleyball. You need to do something during your time in high school. And in regards to clubs, you don't need to join 10 different clubs.
No.
I'd argue that you should join like maybe 2 or 3 and then stay really actively involved in those 2 or 3.
Yes.
Right? So I think a common misconception is that they need to just join as many clubs as they can so that way they can put all those on their resume. I disagree 100%. You need to be able to talk about your experiences in those clubs and have some sort of memories or contributions to those clubs, because otherwise, if you just say you're a part of this club and you can't say anything else about it, it's pointless.
I think it's 100% better to be a leader and to have an impact on one club.
Absolutely, 100%.
Spreading your wings wide makes you very thin in a lot of areas, and I think that's not what they're looking for at all.
Right, and you don't need to be the president, the club president. Let's say, for example, let's say you join 3 clubs. You don't need to be the president of all 3, right? Maybe try to be the president of maybe of one of them, or like a secretary, treasurer. Try to have some sort of leadership role in any of them, but you don't need to be for all 3. You just need to be actively involved in those clubs. So that way, when you get to those essays, writing those essays your senior year, you have a story to tell about your experiences in those clubs, right? So we talked about, joining a sport team freshman year, joining some sort of clubs your freshman year. So I think those are the 3 things that you need to do your freshman year. And then sophomore, junior year, try to get a class office, try to be class president, class secretary, whatever it may be. Community service is huge. If you can do some sort of like community service project that you planned and executed, that'd be great. Not only for your applications, but I mean, just being a good person overall. I urge that a good sense of community service will help you develop and, figure out what you want to do in life. So I'm on community service. Let's see what else. What else is there, do you think, Cole? I'm trying to think of.
I mean, I think overall, developing good relationships with teachers, ultimately, I think, you're going to have letters of recommendation from your teachers.
Well, I think in regards to like sophomore, junior year, I think that's just kind of basically it. Just focus on your grades, those community service projects. You can see if you can try to get some sort of summer internships or get a job over the summer, right?
Yeah.
You want to do something over the summer, whether it's a sport, like football is very active over the summer. That's totally fine. I know over my summers, I did football and I also had a job. I worked at Albertsons, sometimes volunteer at the library. So you want to be busy over the summer. I definitely enjoy high school for sure, right? Don't kill yourself.
You know what I would actually say? I would fill in one more thing is kind of forward thinking a little bit when it came to taking came time to taking the SAT and the ACT, I felt like I had not laid the groundwork, and I mean, at that point, I wished I could have gone back to my freshman year and read a book a week, or even just a book a month, and started studying vocabulary words, because I felt like when it came time to studying for the SAT, I didn't have a good reading foundation. I mean, I knew how to read, and I was obviously decent at reading, but it could have been a lot better. I could have had a lot better vocabulary. And I think even just starting to prepare for those exams early, you'll never have to work super hard to study for the SAT. If you started studying an hour a week your freshman year, you will never have to cram it in right before the exam.
Yeah, I agree. Practice makes perfect. I mean, I saw that with the MCAT, right? Practice questions. Really perfected answering the questions on the exam. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
In some regards, right? But realistically, is that kind of, I don't know. In my personal opinion, I don't think that's.
It's tough. It's tough. You're not thinking about it. You're just not thinking about it. You're doing other things.
Totally. When I was a freshman, 14 years old, I was not thinking about the SAT. I didn't really start thinking about the SAT until junior year. I remember taking my first one. By the way, I totally bombed my first SAT, so don't feel.
We all did.
Yeah,
that's a reality check. Totally my whole life flashed right in front of my eyes. I was like, oh my.
That was like, I remember seeing my score. I was like, oh gosh. But hey, like, get your score back, learn from it, and then just, if you can, look at the questions that you missed. I know the ACT allows you to look at questions that you missed. Look at those, and just keep practicing. Cole recommends that you study every week. Like once a week since freshman year. I think what I would recommend is
studying, I just mean like reading a book.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not necessarily
reading is huge.
It's not whipping out a practice test and studying an hour a week. It's like just start preparing your skills, right? Like part of the SAT, it requires reading skills. It requires like analytical skills. So just developing those skills, I'm not saying whip out a SAT book necessarily. I mean, you can if you want, but like my brother, Zach, he read a ton. Like all through high school, he read every night. He would just, 30 minutes a night before bed, he would read, and he did so well in the reading score.
Yeah.
So well. I could never even come close to that when I was in high school. So the point is, develop your skills. But I would say the real time period where you really got to start thinking about your West Point application is junior year, right?
Yeah, I agree, because that's when you, first of all, the junior year, they have the opportunity for you to go to the summer leadership program. It's called SLE, Summer Leadership Experience.
Huge. Yeah, definitely do that.
I did that at West Point.
100%.
All the academies have it. Air Force Academy has one, Naval Academy. So I did. I applied to all three. I applied to the Air Force, Navy, and Army. I got into all three, but I decided to go to Navy and West Point. What it is just a week-long experience at the academies, and they kind of treat you as a West Point cadet. More or less, for a week. You get to see what it's like to live in the barracks there. You get to see what it's like to go to class. They'll take you out to the field to let you, see what an M4 looks like.
Yeah.
You'll get to march around, get to do some PT with some cadre. So it's really good, like basic introduction to West Point. And that was kind of, I really urge you to apply for this, because if you're interested at all, you should go to this, and this will either reaffirm your decision to go to West Point or tell you, this may be not for me.
Yeah, that's something that I really wished I would have gone to. And I think when I got into West Point, one of the biggest things is like I didn't know what it would be like.
Yeah,
and it was like, shoot,
all
like
the time.
I built this image of what life at West Point would be like. And I have no idea if this is even accurate. But if you go to the SLE, you get to experience it for a whole week. And that's huge. That is so big. And a lot of the people in your SLE class ended up being part of your freshman class at West Point, right?
Yeah, there were about, I think, between 10 to 12 of us in one of my squads for SLE, and I think at least 8 of us ended up going or decided to go to a different school, and that's totally fine. I'm glad that they made that decision, figuring that this is not for them.
Yeah.
I see this a lot. People show up to West Point and a couple may decide to leave because they realize this isn't for them.
Yes.
Which is why the SLE program is such a great program, because it allows for people to figure that out before applying.
Before they move to New York and sign their life away.
So if you can do this SLE program, it'd be great. On the application,
what's the process like? When do you start applying to that?
So you start applying in January your junior year.
Okay. So and what are the requirements? Do you have to put SAT test scores, anything?
When I applied SAT scores, I can't remember if they were required or not. I think they were highly recommended. So that
that sounds about right.
I think they were highly recommended so that can kind of gauge where you are academically, right? But I mean, if you have a bad score, it's totally fine. I would submit your SAT score anyways because they're looking. Remember, West Point looks for a holistic view. They don't want just an academic stud. They want someone who's average in everything.
Yeah.
Right? So they asked me to submit my SATs. I had to write a couple essays expressing my desire to go to West Point and what I hope to get out of SLE. So before you apply and submit the application, I would definitely look up on their website what SLE program is a little bit more. So that way you can kind of gauge, this is what I'm looking for. I think what I said is I wanted to get a little better idea of the life of a cadet. And then I wanted to learn more about the careers offered after West Point, right? Because
definitely.
West Point is just a university. You go there for 4 years, and then you commission as an officer. But then, really, after that, you're an officer for 5 years. You owe 5 years as an active duty military officer, and so you really need to make sure that one, West Point's the school you want to go to, but two, do you want to serve in the military?
Yes.
So
I view it as a 9-year commitment, not a 4-year commitment.
It's a long time. So 5 years active, 3 years reserve after West Point. So.
And then, all right, so let's say you apply to SOE. I know you got to get a letter of recommendation from congressman or senator or president or vice president, but
so that
probably
starts your
congressman.
That starts the summer of your junior year.
Okay.
So the summer between your junior and your senior year. That's when you can start to submit your application. Now, the application is basically it's 2 phases. The first phase is you need to get a nomination from either your congressman, your senator, or the vice president of the United States.
Yep.
To get a nomination, basically, there's an application. Each congressman will have an application. Just go to your congressman's website, and there will be something that says Service Academy nominations. You click on it, and then there's the application for you.
So now this one's huge because you cannot get into West Point without a nomination.
That is right? Correct. You need a nomination.
So when I was, I think,
so everyone needs a nomination. There are nominations set aside for recruited athletes. So West Point does recruit athletes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's done directly with. I'm not a recruited athlete, but I believe that it's done directly with the head coach, and you don't necessarily need to get a nomination from your congressman. They may have separate nominations set aside by certain senators or something like that, but it needs to be within your state.
Okay. So I think I really started thinking about this process around 9th grade, and what I did, because I knew I wasn't an athlete and I would need the congressional nomination to get in. I looked up my congressman, Duncan Hunter, and pretty much every event that he had in the local area, I went to and I met him for probably a 3-year period. I met him several times.
That's a good idea.
And I would shake his hand, but really the congressman isn't the person who decides who gets the nomination. They have a secretary.
They have a board. Congressmen will generally have a board. I'm not saying this for every congressman.
Yeah, so our Duncan Hunter.
Yeah.
And so I would meet Duncan Hunter, obviously, but really the person who you got to talk to, in our case, it was Wes Sherman. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but you have to impress that guy. He is the guy who filters through applications and who ultimately decides who gets the nomination. So that's what I did. And when it came time to applying, Wes Sherman already knew me. He called me up. He said, "Hey, Cole, got your application. Thanks for applying. You'll hear back shortly." Well, we had the interview, and then I got it, obviously. But was there any strategy that you used, or did you just shoot in an application and get it, or what was that process like for you?
I can't say that I went to any of our congressman's community events.
Okay.
But I did reach out to the head of the committee that was in charge of selecting individuals to give a nomination to. And I did that, I'm trying to remember, I think it was the end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year. So I contacted him, gave him a phone call, just told him, "Hey, I'm Calvin Bowling. I'm very interested in going to West Point. This is what I hope to get out of West Point. This is what I'd like to do. in the Army after West Point. So I think early on it's nice to put a name per se in the background, maybe in the back of his head, so that way when you send an application, you'd be like, oh, I remember talking to this guy, beginning this end of last year or something like that. So I would recommend that you contact your congressman committee and just say, hey, give them a heads up that you're initially interested and that you're going to send an application. But I didn't send in my application until that summer between my junior and senior year.
Yeah.
So. And
then after you get the nomination, what is the second part of the application? You said it's in two parts.
Right, yeah. So there's two phases, right? The first phase is the nomination, right? And you can get that through your congressman, your senator, or the vice president. And then the second phase is completing your West Point application, right? So there's the nomination application, and that's done through the congressman. And then there's the West Point application, and that is done online through a West Point online portal. And you can get access to that on their main West Point online page. And basically that's where you submit all your SAT, ACT scores, you write a couple essays, and then you write down all your extracurriculars. And then there you have to go get medically qualified to even go to West Point. And then there's a couple things that you have to do. Like you have to go to a local police station and get a background check. Various miscellaneous things that you have to do. It took me about 2 weeks to get all those other things done. But yeah, so the first phase, nomination. Second phase is sending your application. You won't even qualify to get into West Point if you don't have a nomination, right? So that's why the first phase is critical. I started both of those phases at the same time. So you can get the second phase done. You can fill out your West Point application and you can complete everything before you even get a nomination. That's what I did. So that way, when my nomination was accepted and given to me, my application was already complete. Yeah. And West Point will start. They do with this. I don't know if they still do this. They did this when we were applying. They'll offer letters of assurance. Or
yes, and I actually kind of wanted to ask a little bit more about that. So you said earlier that you got into all three academies
for the summer programs.
Oh, for the summer program. Yeah. Gotcha. But you got into Naval Academy as well?
Yeah, I applied. I ended up applying to the Naval Academy and West Point. I didn't apply to the Air Force Academy.
Okay, so when you get a congressional nomination, I think it's different for every district, but we live in a competitive district, so they said they'll only give us one nomination, right?
Yeah, that's true. Some congressmen will only give out one nomination. So I remember in my interview, on my application, I applied for both a Navy and Army nomination. But during my interview, they said, hey, we're only going to give you one.
So you got to choose.
So I chose West Point. That was one.
How, if you can only get one nomination from a congressman and you need a congressional nomination to get into Academy, how did you get into the Naval Academy and West Point?
So I submitted a nomination application to all three sources. Remember, I said that you can get one from your congressman, your local congressman. You can get one from your senators, their state senators too. Or you can submit a request to the vice president. So I did all three sources, and I ended up getting a nomination from our state senator to the Naval Academy.
Yeah. Okay. And then you said you got a letter of assurance to the Naval Academy. Did you also get one to West Point?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I think the reason why is because I just did everything so early. Okay. Like they'll say on the website, hey, you can start submitting your applications. Let's say, for example, let's say August 1st. You can start submitting applications August 1st. Well, I submitted it within that first week. You can sometimes pre-write your essays. The prompts are usually the same every single year. So I pre-wrote my essays, and then when the portal opened, I just copied and pasted my essay into the portal and submitted it within that week. And if you complete everything very early, that will give that admissions committee time to look at your application, and if they like you, they might send you a letter of assurance. There's another letter that just says, like, hey, keep going, keep doing well, do well in school, keep getting good grades.
I think I got that one.
So
like, you're doing good.
That letter is saying, hey, we really like you. If you continue to do well, you are a very highly qualified candidate, and we might send you an acceptance, an appointment, as they call it. The letter of assurance is saying, hey, the admissions committee has already recommended you for an appointment to the academy. All you need to do is get medically qualified and get the nomination.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they still offer that. This was 4 years ago. I don't know if the academy still does that, but
I'm not aware either. Yeah. And then let's see, what's the next step? So you
finish
the whole application, you get the nominations.
Yeah.
Then you hear back, right?
Yeah, so
am I missing a step? So then it comes what, December, January? That's when people kind of start.
January is when the first wave of acceptances came out for our class.
Okay.
Mid-January. So they sent out letter of assurances beginning in September, and then they'll send out appointments beginning in January. But the main flow of appointments come out in March, and that's generally for most colleges. So that's kind of like the story of how I applied to West Point.
Yep.
I also applied to, other universities, UCLA, UC San Diego, Berkeley, because just as kind of a backup or just an alternate route, because, for example, if I got hurt, I played football senior year. If I got hurt, broke a leg or something like that, and I couldn't report for our day, they wouldn't let me show up, right? You got to be healthy to show up on our day, and our day is the first day of Beast Barracks. So you need to be healthy on that. So I applied to other schools as a backup. So I if you want to go to West Point, I highly recommend that you don't just apply to West Point. You need to also have other backgrounds, because
100%. Yeah.
I mean, nothing in life is
nothing
is life guaranteed, right? Tomorrow you could break an arm or something like that. So
yeah.